Welcome to episode 2 of Building Stories, the podcast where we tell funny and honest stories about construction and digital transformation as well. Today we've got Dave Broadhurst, also known as Broadie. And Dave is pretty much a safety guru. He's been around for a long time in training organisations, educating them. He's an advocate for health and well-being, and is really just trying to help keep things safe on the construction sites and through organisations. Is that a good summary, Dave, or what did I miss? Probably a lot of things.
I think that's a good summary, mate.
So the way we go here, mate, is we go through a few questions. Young years. When you were young, you're a kid, you're playing outside, was there any hints you were going to be a builder or a maker when you were growing up or be involved in this industry?
I don't think I had a choice. I was brought up in a farming community in north of England, and at a young age, my dad decided to leave the farm and set up a civil construction business, and he became one of the main contractors to a multinational called Taylor Woodrow. And so even at the age of 12, 13, 14, when an operator didn't turn up on one of his jobs, I'd be dragged out of bed at 5 o'clock in the morning to say that you're not going to school today, son. You're coming to drive a machine for me. And I just loved it. Loved it.
What kind of machines are we talking?
Oh, we're talking old JCB 6Ds and Ford Autodigs, pretty clunky machines back in the early 70s. But that's where I cut my teeth. And I remember I was telling a story yesterday that I used to get a maths lesson from my dad that I'd be put on a stockpile, and he'd say, "Right, me lad, I want you to count how many buckets of material you're putting in that truck and how many trucks go through that gate, and if you miss one, I'll kick your ass." And I much preferred that maths lesson to sitting in the classroom. So I was wired to get into construction. Like I say, I think I was born for it. Didn't really have a choice, but I loved every second of it.
Well, and it's straight in the into the commercial reality of construction, right?
Yeah. Tracking productivity. Yeah, that's right. So you must have had a choice at some stage about this career. Why did you choose to go this particular path that you've kind of gone now?
I just love being outside. I'm probably one of the lucky individuals that I've loved what I chose as a career path. I went into pipelines when I was 17. So sadly, my mum and dad split up when we were 16, or when I was 16. I had two brothers, one older, one younger. They weren't wired the way I was wired. They were happy to sit in a classroom and look at academic ways of learning things, but I couldn't sit still long enough. So I left home at 17, went working away on pipelines, and that's where I cut my teeth. And I was lucky enough that a company called McAlpines offered me a construction traineeship when I just turned 18, and I became one of their youngest staff foremen at 21. So that's how I progressed into large diameter pipelines, which was my speciality around the world. So,
and you're able to travel a bit with that line of work, eh?
Yeah, and not so much. CodeSafe now as a business was really, we found it because we could see that there was a skills gap opening up across a lot of different sectors, and the guys who trained me how to be a good pipe layer and how to be a good supervisor, they were all hanging their boots up and retiring. And there was no knowledge transfer, or there was a dilution of knowledge transfer. That we've still got all these major infrastructure projects going on, and the reason why they're blowing budget and blowing time is because the people on the jobs who are running things possibly haven't necessarily got the experience that they need to make sure that we keep things on track as well as we should do.
Yeah, and you experienced a lot of that firsthand, eh? So what are some of the key moments along that journey up till now? Is it a couple of things you can pick out as moments you realise something, or perhaps the sliding doors and you went through a particular door heading in a different direction?
I think leaving home at 17 was obviously one, and falling into an environment that I just thrived in, which for a lot of people it's not conducive, but for me it worked. And then probably the next sliding door was actually emigrating to Australia off the back of doing a lot of professional athletics. So I came to Australia in '89, and because of my career and experience from the age of 12 onwards in pipelines and construction, I just landed projects and jobs here in Australia that I seem to know more than often a lot of my bosses knew about laying large diameter pipes. And it feeds into the biggest challenges, right? Because I know that's another question coming up. And I didn't, in the early days, my approach was, you don't know what you're doing, get out of road, and I'll show you how to do it properly. Or I used to get comments all the time, and I even right up until, well, I often get it even with our business. It's like, Broadie, you're concerning yourselves you're concerning yourselves with things above your pay grade.
Mm.
And I'm like, yeah, but what I'm seeing, it's going to turn to custard if we don't address it now. Sadly, I hadn't learned how to call people up when there was an improvement opportunity identified. I used to call people out on it. And there's a very big difference in the response you get. And that's something I've had to learn over time as well. When you identify something that you can see is going to turn to custard if it's not dealt with appropriately, it's how do you raise that concern in a way that's non-confrontational and doesn't make someone feel judged because they might have been the person that made the decision in the first place. So learning what we used to call soft skills is probably one of the most important areas of development that I believe is needing to be focused on to get the outcomes that we need across our industry today.
I've had to learn that lesson over and over again myself. It comes back to people, and this podcast is about building stories. It's about people's stories.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I've got to be careful, right? Because I know like everything's going AI and all these, and I'm like, well, it's great. AI is a great tool, but let's not forget about HI. Right? Human intelligence, human intuition, human interaction. Yeah. If we think that AI is going to be the silver bullet, as much as it is going to help industry of every category, ultimately it's people who have to do something or make a decision or execute on something that we can never forget about. How do they feel on any given day that will determine how they go about executing a task.
Yeah.
So it's not either or, it's both and. So, yeah, I think this is why I love this stuff, because I and maybe it's my personality, that I revel in this type of situation. Because in the last 10 years of my career, before we set CodeSafe up, or even now with CodeSafe, we usually get brought in when a project's gone pear-shaped to look at, well, how do we get it back on track, Broadie? And we say, well, though the systems you had in place obviously aren't working for you, else we wouldn't be in this mess in the first place. So let's look at what the people are doing on the ground that is working against us right now, you know. And it's very much about, and again, it's a skill that we often overlook and we devalue, to say, well, critical thinking, right? How do we adapt, right? And again, AI, that can help us minimize the risk of making a wrong mistake. But at the end of the day, there's a human element that we've got to empower people. And I've seen it in industry over 20 years that we've systemized our industry so much, people think they don't have to think anymore. Mm-hmm. And it's bloody dangerous.
Yeah. There's this common phrase, it talks about head, heart, and hands. And, and you know, with the building industry, we see a lot of hands. We're doing the work. And a lot of the tools that enable us are often about, you know, the headpiece. But where the heart really impacts. And I think this is, to a large extent what you're talking about. The heart is actually has a huge impact on how we as an industry move along. Even to your point about, and to your questions about, how do I respond to this person about a thing that isn't going quite right? How do we check in? How do I raise this up without offending them? How do I address this issue? They're all heart related.
Absolutely, Michael. It's all about how do we make people feel, right? People will remember how we made them feel way longer than what we taught them.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. And I think a lot of people underestimate the power of relationships in our industry. Right. Yes, we have to be transactional, but if we do the transaction without the relationship, that's why we've got such it's an issue, but it's a massive opportunity around psychological health and well-being. Because if you look at statistics, more people in our industry take their own lives than get killed on the job. So there's something we're not doing around the heart piece.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's my passion. Like, we set up a charity a few years ago called Braveheart. And it was about
talk about that.
How do we help men? Because we're talking about a male-dominated work environment. We're talking about over 87% of suicides are male, not female. So there's things that males aren't dealing with at an emotional heart level that, hey guys, let's start talking about this. Let's not just talk about it like we've been talking about mental health for the last 15, 20 years and seeing the rise of mental health issues and the rise of suicides. We've got to raise it, but give people strategies to know how to deal with stress and anxiety before it comes to depression and suicidal thoughts. And so that's really a passion of mine, knowing for most of my career as a superintendent, I was spending more time counselling guys on their life challenges that was distracting them on the job, as opposed to teaching them how to lay a pipe. Because I think it's what we're talking about now, Michael, it's a segue into that other question about how has industry changed since you first started. I'm like, well, when I first went working away from home for McAlpines, they used to put out a quarterly newsletter, and on the top left-hand corner of that newsletter, there used to be a pie chart on costs to a job, and there was always a slither. There was always a slither in that pie chart for fatalities.
Yeah, right.
So they allowed for it, right? And
really
sadly,
in your face.
Really in your face. But the problem back then, so I'm talking 40 years ago, right? 38 years ago, not that long ago. Every project I worked on with that company, we killed blokes, and not just one, right? What the last project I worked on with them, I was lucky that we used to work 7 days a week for 6 weeks straight, and then we'd get a long weekend from a Friday afternoon to a Monday morning. We'd get a long weekend every 6 weeks, and I was running a crew. And we'd got the pipeline 3.5 miles out into the North Sea, 2.5 meter diameter. So this is the size of the pipe, right? We had to do the tie-in to the block out in the pump station. And my best mate was having his 21st back home. And I swapped my weekend out with the guy and said, mate, can we swap weekends? Because I want to get back to Rob's 21st and I'll take your weekend the next weekend. And can you look after me crew? Anyway, that weekend, that guy and my crew all died of methane poisoning.
Oh, my goodness.
So they were 6 meters deep, breaking out the head wall, the block out in the head wall. What they thought was a decommissioned pump station had a leaky valve. So when they broke through the wall with the CP9s and the jackhammers, the methane gas came from the pump station into the trench. And all of them.
Wow.
So I'm just lucky that if it hadn't been for me swapping my weekends with that guy, I wouldn't be here.
My goodness me.
Right, and I think that's why, and Luke mentioned it earlier, that we get put into that safety expert environment, but I've learned over my 40 years that everybody says safety is number one, but sadly that's a lot of BS. Right, productivity is number one. It has to be. Because if we're not making money, we're not doing anything, right? We're not doing another job. We're not employing more people. So, but what we've learned to do, and because of my operational background, it's looking at, well, how do we integrate safety outcomes with operational improvement lenses, right? Because then you'll get organizations buying into that. They won't buy into safety only when they have to, right? And sadly, we haven't done well. Safety professionals, because I don't have a safety qualification, even though I've had to keep people safe for 40 years. Safety people haven't done a real good job of selling the benefits of safety because they've siloed it from operational processes, and everybody sees safety as an appendage that gets in the way of productivity. Whereas if you educate people to say, well, if you look at a good work design process which incorporates good safety, you will get a better productivity outcome, because where most people get hurt and killed and where most jobs get risk exposure through the roof is when they're doing rework because of defects. So technical proficiency contributes to bad safety outcomes. And most people don't put those two things together. And if we can help industry, and that's what my passion is with CodeSafe, and long before CodeSafe, it was like, hang on, if we get it right the first time, we're going to make more profit and we're going to kill less people. Maybe that's an approach we should be starting to look at, So, and that's where I love what you guys do. It's helping people identify, well, how do we get safety back in design? Right? Because the best controls are elimination and engineered controls. Most of the controls are lower on the hierarchy and less beneficial to the business. But when you don't get safety in design, you don't get engineered controls brought in right at the start of a project. And then when people do identify those engineered controls, it's too late. Oh, we didn't allow for that. It's like, well, we'll just go with a piece of paper and say, well, the swims is going to keep us safe. Never does. So, sorry for rambling.
Yeah.
I just.
How do we teach people? How do we get people to be engaged? How do we get people along the journey, but through that heart-related, line of thinking, you had before?
Authenticity. I remember on one of these, it was actually for Murphy's. After I finished with McAlpines, I went for Murphy's. And there was my section supervisor. It was a big, scary Irish navvy. And again, I was only a young lad trying to prove myself. And I was looking after a particular section. I used to specialise in deep excavation and inclement ground conditions because I just loved the challenge of that. And because I'd been doing it since I was 12, I was 21 and 22, and I knew more than most blokes that were double my age. And because I was interested. Right, you see a lot of people work in these environments and they're sort of not really interested, so they're not really learning much. But anyway, this guy, Eddie Ryan, he came to me one day, and like I mentioned earlier, I didn't know how to be a good leader back then. I was a leader of dominance, not influence. All right, this is critical when it comes to psychological safety and making people feel safe. Right. Anyway, Eddie came to me one day and he said, Broadie, get up here. And he pulled me out of the trench, rough Irish accent. He said, me lad, he said, if you don't pull your head in, the lads are going to bury you. Because what I'd be doing...
Meant it.
Well, absolutely. And I don't have to go into the detail, but that shit used to happen all the time with Clarker Works, and people used to rub these lads up the wrong way. It's like, that was an unfortunate incident where that bloke got run over by a D9 excavator. It's like, holy crap. Like, that stuff used to happen all the time. And so, anyway, not something I'm proud of, but that's the environment, right? Anyway, he pulled me out of the trench. He said, Broadie, if you don't pull your head in, they're going to bury you. Because I used to set him a task, and then I'd walk past him and say, "No, that's not how you do it here." And I'd climb over top of him, and he said, "Broadie, you got to set him a task and walk away." And he said, "The only advice I can give you," and again, this is back in the 70s, right, the early 80s. He said, "Lads don't care how much you know until they know how much you care." And he walked off, and I'm standing there as a 21, 22. I'm like, what the? I don't even know what that means, right? But over my career, I've realised that but what Eddie used to, he lived that. He didn't just say it, he lived it, because we knew that he would protect us from doing stuff that was really, really dangerous, that the company was asking us to do to meet a schedule. And he would stand between us and the company and say, "I'm not having me guys doing that." Yet I've seen the same bloke throw somebody out of the brew caravan that used to trundle along with the pipeline if they were 5 minutes late coming out from Smoko. He was scary. He'd run into the brew. He'd run up to the brew shed, and everybody be clambering to get out of the door. And the last person, he'd just grab him by the scruff of the neck and grab him by the belt, and he'd throw him out of the brew shed. He's like, "Your time's up, me lad." So he was a hard taskmaster, but we knew when it come to
he had your
crunch,
back.
He cared for us. Right, he'd give lads days off if they knew they were splitting up from the missus or they were having trouble at home. It's like, get yourself home and get it sorted out. But if you went to the company and say, "Oh, I need some leave," you're not taking time off. And we would walk over hot coals for that bloke. We would work.
They had a lot of loyalty.
Absolutely, because he and all life. Whoa. All I've tried to do in my career is honour that bloke.
Wow.
Because
big impact.
That's what's missing in our industry. And that's why, and it's that bad right now. The thing is, I love it. I love the colourful characters you meet in our industry. And they will work in environments that most people would turn their nose up at. So that we get to work and live in comfortable homes and offices that they bust their chops building for us. Yet people in society look down on lads who wear high-vis for a living or lasses who wear high-vis for a living. It's like, you know what? These are highly intelligent people. They're just not educated. So please don't look down on them. Please, there's a reason why we're doing what we're doing. It's because a lot of people wouldn't do it, right? And so, even with my last 10 years in the industry, before we set Code Safe up, I'd get brought into jobs all the time that had gone off track, gone pear-shaped, and for me, it's like Broadie, we're not. The issue was usually the superintendent or the supervisor. Because they were a leader of dominance, not influence. And I know people in our industry that if you're not making them feel good about themselves and the work that they're doing, which is critical to society, they will sabotage you at every turn.
Yeah, so you're meeting them on their level, but also helping them understand the bigger picture of what's going on.
Absolutely. Well, the charity that we set up a few years ago called Braveheart, and the talks that we do, we got some global research done through some relationships that we have, and we looked at what are the key things, what are the 6 key things that impact someone's state of mind, and we identified all that through global research, and we put a program together. And I remember, and it's mapped against Maslow's hierarchy, so there's science behind it, right? Anyway, I went and did a toolbox talk for a plumbing company. They had about 50 plumbers in the room, lads and lassies. I do share a 3-minute video about this is what living with purpose looks like. Don't go looking for a purpose. Do what you do with purpose. Because people go looking to try and find a purpose, and the purpose is right in front of them. Right? Anyway, we do that talk, and I'm in my tradie kilt, the old Braveheart thing, William Wallace, and once I've done that, I say, right, I'm going to go around and what's one thing you've got out of this toolbox talk. And I get to this young 20, I think he was 23, 24, young plumber. And I said, right, what's one thing? He said, I'm more than just a plumber.
That's good.
I said, tell me more about that. He goes, you've just made me realise that I'm not just sticking two pipes together. I'm actually providing a critical service for my community. And if I don't do a good job of it, literally, we are all in the shit.
Yeah.
But the exciting thing was the owner of that business rang me later on that day. He said, Broadie, he said, I was like overhearing the conversations in the workshop and the warehouse when they were grabbing all the gear after the toolbox talk to go and do the job. He said, I was hearing conversations I never thought I would have heard in a plumbing warehouse in all of my years in plumbing. You've lifted their vision.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, it's about how do we make people feel? How do we get that heart connection? Because if we don't get that connection, nothing's going to stick in here. Right? Because it comes right back to Eddie's one-liner. Lads don't care how much you know until they know how much you care.
Mm.
And it's the best piece of advice I ever got. And that was I think 21. I think I was 21, 22. So anyway.
Awesome. So what are you most proud of personally in your career up to date? Because it sounds like a lot of people you've helped along the way and a lot of projects you've worked on. What are you most proud of?
Surviving COVID as a small business owner, I think.
I think that'll resonate with a lot of people. Absolutely
right. So I'm proud of my kids. I look at the upbringing I had, and as guys, a lot of our identity comes from the job that we do, which is healthy to a point. But if we draw too much identity from what we do, when something happens and we can't keep doing it, that's when we start thinking about the rope in the garage being a good option. Mm. And so for me, I look at how I was brought up. And again, my dad was one of 12, pretty rough upbringing. He didn't know any better. So we had a fairly abusive environment that we sort of grew up in. And so I think one of my things, and I don't voice it much, but being a dad to my kids that doesn't replicate the dad that I had.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because they always talk about the abused being the abuser.
Mm.
And so I think, again, working away, Eddie Ryan, caring, it really doesn't matter what environment you're in. If you can genuinely care,
connect with people.
Yeah, and the people in your charge, it's probably not a bad environment.
Mm.
And it feeds right back into where everybody's overcooking the shit out of mental health right now. That's why we're talking about it, and yet the statistics are going up, not coming down. It's like, well, and again, I'm not having a crack at organisations that are doing a good job. They're doing the well-intentioned organisations, but the reason we felt led to set up a charity and engage some really, really great people to help us develop something that was a fence at the top of the cliff, not another ambulance at the bottom. Again, it's like, hang on, we're we're just giving people piecemeal token gesture veneer solutions, and people are seeing right through it.
Mm.
You know, so I think the achievement for me is like, yeah, I've had a good career. I've lucky enough to develop a good reputation. But it's the relationship I have with the kids.
Yeah, yeah. What about a project? Is there a particular project that you've really loved or look back on with fondness, maybe?
I've loved all of them. Well, it's not that. Well, I think one of the ones I'm proud of. I was working for 10X, so they bought a company that I was working for down in Melbourne. They wanted to get into the water infrastructure game because Sydney Water had billions of dollars worth of work to do, and 10X was Sydney based. So they said, "Oh, let's buy a water business down in Melbourne and let's get everybody to move to Sydney and do all this work." And when they bought the business, they said, "Right, guys, you're all moving to Sydney to do all this Sydney water work." And said, "No, we're not." Anyway, long story short, Sydney Water gave them a couple of projects just to test them out on. So they were like a $5 million project. But one of the projects was relining a transfer water main down the middle of Parramatta Road in Sydney.
Mm.
Anyway, that job set off. They got some guys in that said they knew what they were doing. Anyway, I get a phone call down here in Melbourne. They say, "Oh, Broadie, we're about to do a hydro test on this pipe. Any chance you can just go fly up and just check it out before we fill it full of water?" And so I said, "All right." I flew up there and I said, "Oh, have you been doing tests as you've been?" "Oh, no, we haven't." I said, "All right. Can you show me your training records? What training have they provided you for this type of pipe that you've laid?" "Oh, no, we never got any training." "All right." And it was 2.5 kilometres long, this pipeline, right? And I said, "So you've never done a test on any of the joints?" "Nah." "Right." I said, "Put a fan in at that end. I'm going to climb in at this end, and I'll see you at the other end." And I went, I crawled through the 2.5 kilometres of pipe, and it was a 1,400 diameter pipe, right? And it's like, I came out the other end. I said, "Do you realise that you've only got 2 joints on your entire pipeline that are in spec?" I said, you can fill it with water if you want." I said, "But it'll never hold water." And they said, "Well, what do you recommend, David?" I said, I recommend you pull it out and start again if you want to protect your brand in Sydney." Anyway, so they pulled it all out and started again. So,
they did.
Yeah, and they said, "Right, David, you need to be up here. You need to move up here to help us do this." I said, "No, I'm not coming." I said, "I'll fly up it. I'll do 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off." Anyway, we got that job. So what they were doing, the liners we were putting in, they built this contraption to put liners down, and they were getting 2 liners a shift, a 12-hour night shift, because that's all they could get access on Parramatta Road. Anyway, so I went up. I said, "Show us how you're getting them in there." And I just watched for the first 2 or 3 nights. And I'm like, "All right." So we finished night shift. I said, "Right, I need a welder to stay back. We're going to make another carrying mechanism." So we worked all that day in the yard. We came up with a different mechanism to run the sleeves down the inside of the pipe. The next night we got 12 liners. Next night we got 14. And so we got the project back on track, right?
Wow.
Because I was lucky that I'd done a similar job in England when I was 18. Right, but that was a 2.5 metre diameter pipe, not a 1,400 diameter pipe. But the methodology I was able to recall, how did we do it back then? And anyway, got it back on track, got it all done. So I was quite proud of that, and I was proud of the relationship that I developed with people on that job, because they were doing the best they could with what they were given, and they were killing themselves trying to do what they were told to do. And I'm still mates with those people to this day. One of them, who was a small subby at the time, he's now got one of the biggest pipeline companies in Australia, Killard Group. Jerry's I think he's turning over about 150, 200 million a year now. Yet back then he had a 3.5 ton excavator and a 6-yard dump truck. So that's probably one. But I think from a code safe perspective, we've had a lot of wins, but probably the phone call I got when we were doing some work with NACAP, who were a large pipeline company, they said, Broadie, the guys up in Roma, well, it was actually, I can't remember, anyway, it was near Roma, so out back Queensland. We went up, they had a near fatality. We got brought in as a corrective action, gave the corrective action. The corrective action won them the National Pipeline Safety Innovation of the Year award, but it also won them the International Safety Award over in Washington, D.C. through IPLOCA, because that company got bought by Quanta, who's one of the biggest utility companies in the world. Anyway, but that was all great. But the exciting thing for me and the win for me was their national safety manager rang us and said, Broadie, the guys on the job won't let people touch that machine until they've scanned the code and watched the video that you helped us make. With the comment of, if you're touching that machine, you need to watch that video because that'll show you how we do it around here. Right? And if you look at human behavior, the thing that we need to create is a social norm. Because people will want to assimilate into, well, how do I get accepted by my peers? And when you get people saying a statement like, all right, you're not touching that machine until you watch our video. and that for me is like, that's worth getting out of bed at 3:00 in the morning to jump on a plane to go to Roma. Bloody
so
tickets
is this the start of the QR code? This is the first time you're going to see it, and you see, okay, there's this potential for this technology that's going to actually, help us with this social norm.
Well,
is that where you see it? And
how it happened, Michael, was again because of my operational background. So I'm working for an alliance. I was a contract superintendent, pipeline superintendent for this alliance, and it was Boulderstone, UGL, a couple others. Anyway, we had an incident. Lad nearly got killed on the job. I was a super, so we do the investigation, root cause analysis, all that stuff, and you could sense it that in an organisation that had a no blame culture. I could see all the fingers starting to point in my direction on who they were going to blame. And I won't use the exact terminology in the podcast, but I told them where they could stick that idea. And I said, guys, if we don't stop thinking that what we're doing is working for us, yes, it might meet a compliance tick, but we're not educating guys on what good practice looks like round here. So we're actually this is getting worse, not better, because the people of my vintage, we're all starting to hang our boots up. So these young uns coming in, they've got nobody to learn from, right? So I said, until we find better ways to communicate critical information for lads like me who struggle to read and write, this is going to get worse. So that was an incident that happened 14, 15 years ago, right? I'm out running. And I have a faith, right? So I'm out running, I'm chittering to the big fella and doing a bit of swearing. I figured he's big enough to handle it. And so anyway, I'm like, mate, there's got to be a better way than all this bloody paperwork, right? And I don't know why, I just get this, I thought it was a crossword, right? Anyway, I get home, and Luke knows that I'm not the technical person in our business. So I get home and I said to Jackie, my wife, who's our CEO, I said, hey, Jack, I'm having this conversation and, this, and she said, oh, it's a quick response code. It's a QR code. I'm like, what the hell's a QR code? Right. Keeping in mind, this is 14 years ago, right? So I go doing research on QR codes. I'm like, oh, it's not a bad piece of, no, that's not a bad piece of kit, that. Anyway, so when I'm still in the alliance, I'm still a pipeline superintendent. They didn't get rid of me because they had nobody else who could fill my seat. Anyway, but what I had at the time was an Aldi brochure, right? Because QR codes have been used in marketing and retail for quite a while. Anyway, so I'm in my site office, and everybody that came in through the door would get to see my Aldi brochure, and with a comment of, imagine this being a safety procedure. One page, QR code, watch what to do next, right? And everybody's like, oh, great idea, Broadie, we'll get back to you. Nobody got back to me, right? Then we got a new alliance manager in. He comes in, I'm looking after the biggest project at the time. So he comes in, introduced himself. Hello, my name's Kevin Devlin. So this is the guy we're meeting, Luke, on the 4th, right? So I'm Kevin Devlin. I'm the new alliance manager. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. I said, and I couldn't help myself. I'm like, because he's all about culture and this and the other. And I'm like, and he's like, Broadie, what's wrong? I said, look, I love your intent, mate. I said, but all of these initiatives that you shiny asses come up with, I said, it doesn't change anything for us fellas in the trench. So fill your boots, you know. And he said, anyway, he just goes, so what's your bright idea? By this stage, my Aldi brochure's a bit dog-eared and tattered and and the graduate, and this is how far back I'm coming from, guys, and this is quite ironic that I reckon God's got a sense of humour that he's got us running a software business. At that time, I didn't know how to use a computer. So I had a graduate engineer that the company I worked for used to give me to do my daily diary and everything on the computer. Because I used to say, well, I can spend all day trying to work out how to use this computer and typing how the job went wrong. Or you can give me a graduate engineer for 40 grand a year and he can do all that and I'll stay outside for 12 hours to make sure that the job goes right. Where do you want me? So I got away with it for years, right? Anyway, so Peter Edwards, who's the graduate engineer, as soon as I opened my drawer and got the Aldi brochure out, he just grabbed a set of drawings and put it in front of him and I could see him killing himself laughing because he knew what was coming, right? He'd heard it probably 20 or 30 times with other people that had walked in the door. Anyway, I showed it to Kevin. I said, mate, imagine this has been a safety procedure. Kevin goes, actually, I sort of like the idea of that. He said, what would it cost to get a pilot up and running? I said, I'll give us 10 grand. I said, my missus knows some people in media. I said, we can knock up a couple of videos and we'll see what happens. Anyway, so I went to the safety team and said, right, what are the issues that we're having that's causing us the most incidents? And at the time, it was people using a demolition saw to cut pipes, either choosing the wrong blade or putting the blade in incorrectly and the blade shattering. And we had a guy cut the side of the face. We had a guy cut on the inside. Like, he was lucky he didn't die because it missed his artery by like millimeters. Anyway, so we took a work instruction for safe use of a demolition saw, translated it into a short video. That was the safety one. The second one we did was fitting a rubber ring in a large diameter pipe, which was QA, right? And Kevin always forgets about the QA one. But we made those two videos that changed my career in 6 months. Right? Because I just, and again, coming from a farming background and not spending a lot of time at school, it's like, well, let's get back to basics. How do people learn their trade? Sitting and reading or watching and doing? And so what we did with that initiative, it won them the Water Industry Safety Innovation of the Year Award back in 2011, and that put us on the map. And we didn't even have CodeSafe set up then. It was just, and the GM at Melbourne Water dragged us into his office. He said, David, what's this idea you've come up with? I'm like, and usually I only got dragged in there when I was in trouble. So I'm like, or I was challenging the status quo. I said, oh yeah. And he said, so whose idea is it? I said, I suppose it's mine. He said, do you work for Boulder Stone? I said, no, I'm a contractor. He goes, so it's your IP then? I said, I don't know. No business acumen whatsoever, right? And he says, David, I would strongly suggest that you've possibly come up with a game changer. You might want to go and consider setting up a business that can provide these services to industry. And I'm like, oh, all right, thanks, Dave. So I ring my missus straight out of the meeting, and I said to Jack, I think we need to set up a business. That's how it started, right?
Rest is history.
The rest is history. Like the stuff with NACAP, because we got some recognition really early on in our career. through the Water Industry Awards. In 2013, we got recognition through WorkSafe Victoria. We won their award. Then we got national recognition through Safe Work Australia. And so anybody that's had any issues or they need a corrective action to keep the contract, they're ringing us, hey, Broadie, how fast can you mobilise for us? So it's not always the right way to get brought into an organisation, but we'd rather have the solution go in that it never happens again than the solution never been implemented in the first place. So, but more and more now, we're getting opportunities to get in front of the incident because we've had our solution evaluated by RMIT, and so organisations can go to their insurer and say, we're looking to implement CodeSafe. It's evidence based. It's got research proving that it reduces incidents. What sort of a rebate are you going to give us on our insurance premium?
Mm.
And so these companies are getting more than enough money through their insurance rebate scheme to implement our solution. Mm. And I'm like, not a bad way to go, right? So,
and they're becoming proactive, not reactive.
Yeah. And again, that's where I love what you guys do. It's like, well, where's the data? What's going to help us make better choices, right? And that needs to come in all sorts of different forms and mediums. But it's how do we make sure that the information that an individual needs is available in the right medium at the right time. You know, it's about no shortage of information. Most people need to unlearn more than they need to learn today.
Yeah,
very true.
That brings me to some of this modern, the modern workforce, I guess. You need to be able to respond rapidly. It's very, it's quite progressive in that sense. We've got a different workforce now. You need to be able to respond to changes quicker. Is that what you guys see in having tools available like you've built?
Well, I think every like I remember being on the first project with Melbourne Water that was classed as a fast track project, and all the guys on the job, we all shit ourselves like, what the hell does that mean, right? It really didn't mean much difference at all, other than the guys in the office put an unrealistic schedule together. And then they came outside and said, right, we have to make this schedule. And the guys like me who knew what they were doing said, we'll do the best we can. We weren't intimidated by it, whereas younger people with less experience tried to kill themselves to meet that schedule. Right? So there's wisdom, because the ones who went fast were back there doing all the defects and rework. So the job took twice as long to finish, whereas we were done and dusted. We were finished and we were sat back having a beer, we weren't necessarily doing that. But the bottom line is, if you plan and you get it, you can only cut the corners so far. And I think what's happened, industry is realising that, you know what, we've pushed it, we've gone as lean as much as we can. We're doing it now to the detriment of our industry and the people in it. So we have to have, like ACA, John Davies, who I know, he's got a terminology. We need to disrupt our industry or die as an industry, because we're just not we're not attracting the right people to our industry who we need to deliver these projects. Because we're in a fast growing country, we're in a new developing country, right? So we've got to change the game.
Definitely. So you got these younger people coming through, and you've got this experience going back to the 70s. What's one piece of advice you would give someone who is interested in working in this industry, design, construction, something like that?
Learn to know yourself. Right, you've got to have the personality for it. You've got to have the aptitude for it. And I think it's self-awareness. So it comes back to the heart again, right? I see a lot of people who they've got the head knowledge for the industry, but they can't handle the pressure. Right? Sadly, I've seen too many young engineers, good engineers, promoted too early in their career to be project managers, and they can't handle the pressure as a project manager, but they just wanted the paycheck and they wanted the title. right? It's like, and without being too crude, it's like I get people all the time. Oh, Broadie, I want to do. I said, mate, you're not a project manager's arsehole right now, right? So you might want to cut that. Learn to be a good engineer.
Yeah. What's that? That's a saying is about that, isn't it? You can get promoted to your level of incompetence.
Absolutely, yeah. And because we've got a skills and labour shortage, that is happening now more than we've ever seen it, right? Because people are desperate, right? People have been accelerated through training programs, they've been accelerated through their career path programs, and then we wonder why we've got stress and anxiety going off the charts, because it's like, well, you're not, the people you've got in that seat are not ready to be in that seat, so they're suffering from imposter syndrome, all of these heart things, all of these feelings. It's like most people feel anxious every day at work. Right. And there's nothing wrong with a feeling of anxiety for a short period of time, as long as you've got the solution that helps you reduce anxiety back to stress. Because, and I do these talks all the time, it's like, guys, your brain is a muscle, right? If you're not experiencing stress and a bit of anxiety from time to time, you are not growing. You are not giving life a good crack. But let's give you a strategy. Let's give you some tools to know how much is too much. And I always, when I'm talking to guys, especially, because we think, well, as humans, we think in pictures, not words. So what I do when I'm doing these talks, I say, all right, guys, how many of you guys go to the gym? And quite a number of them put that. I said, right, as of tomorrow, you're not allowed to put any weights on the bar. And they all start laughing. And if I stay quiet long enough, somebody says, well, how much stronger are we going to get? I said, all right, well, let's take that analogy that we're now talking about managing stress. Brain being a muscle, you need resistance for growth. So what we're giving and what we're doing for our kids at school right now, and what we're doing for young people leaving unis, or you're feeling a bit stressed, a bit anxious about, oh, let's give you 2 weeks off, put you on some medication, and they miss the opportunity to grow and develop and build their capacity to handle what life's going to really throw at them. Right? Because stress in life will never reduce. Not if you're really giving it a good go, right? Which most of us should be doing. But what we can do along the way is know how to build our capacity and capability to deal with the stress, so it never becomes anything worse than that. And that, again, for me, we do talks all the time. We've developed our program and platform that we can integrate physical and psychological safety in one element. Mm-hmm. Because again, you can't separate. It's like you can't separate safety. You can't separate safety from quality. It's like, no, we've got to integrate these things. If you're doing a good job and you're doing it right, then it's going to be a safer job. It's the same with stress and anxiety. It's like, stop running away from those butterflies in your stomach. That you should be embracing that feeling, as long as you know what to do next. But most people are. They've not given the strategy to know what to do next. They're given an exit strategy. And then they come back and they just keep going around that mountain time and time again and wonder why they're not progressing.
Mate, you've been very honest and so much wisdom so far in this session. But what personal mistake or mistakes would you perhaps share that could educate others, in your career, on a project, some particular scenario where you go, oh, I wish I had done that different?
Sure. Geez, I think that on a daily basis. Oh, I could have done that a bit better.
I think we all do.
Absolutely. Well, I think that probably the biggest thing I've learned, certainly as a guy, be quick to apologise when you get it wrong. Mm-hmm. And again, it's about that authenticity. It's about being having humility. That I try now, and it's still a thing when you're used to a guy is wired. I've got to find a solution to this, Right? It gets us into trouble at work. It gets us into trouble at home when all our wives want to do is they just want somebody to listen to them about how crazy their day's been with all the kids or whatever's going on, and all we do is we just start throwing solutions at them, and it's like, no, we've just got to learn to actively listen and be present. That's all most people need, and then it's about asking the right questions and helping people self-discover what a good solution would be that you can then celebrate them for coming up with.
Figuring it out.
Yeah, and so I think as I've got older, because I know that's what nearly got me buried when I was younger. I'd get out of the way. That's not how you do it. Now it's like, all right, guys, hey, let's just have a quick conversation about this. How do we feel this is going? Is there another way that you think we could have a look at this? Probably one of the best books I ever read. Two really good books. And I don't do a lot of reading because it takes me too long to read a book. But the two books that I've read that I think, well, there's three actually. Three books that I read when I started running large crews of construction workers. First one was Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People. Second one was The Psychology of Judgment and Decision Making. Can't remember who the author is. And the third one was Humble Inquiry. Right. I think just, because again, it's about retention, right? I'll read How to Win Friends and Influence People, or I cheat a bit. I now go for the audio book. But we can't think that a set and forget. Oh, I read that book 10 years ago. Well, yeah. What are you implementing today from the book that you read 10 years ago? Those foundational books, those are things I reckon we should be revisiting those things at least once a year, once every couple of years, because we are surrounded by negative. We operate in a negative society, right? We are drawn to the negative. Even with the meeting I had with Macquarie Group yesterday, the guy I work with at Lend-Lease, he's saying, "Oh yeah, we made these videos and we showed them what not to do and blah blah blah." And I'm like, "All right, well, how do I correct David in a way that, because we didn't show them what not to do, we showed them what to do, right?" But people naturally get drawn to, don't do this, don't do this. We do it with our kids. Don't go near the fire. Don't do. It's like, well, what you should be doing is using positive psychology, because you only ever get what you focus on. Right. And again, I only know, I've only learned all this stuff over years through the books I've read and people like Eddie, but probably mainly from Professor Helen Lingard from RMIT. Because when we won the WorkSafe Award in 2013, the director at WorkSafe said, "Congratulations on your award, David, but we don't think you know what you've come up with." And I'm like, "I probably don't, mate. I'm a pipe layer." So they introduced us to RMIT, and a lady by the name of Professor Helen Lingard. She heads up their construction research department. So they came in and they evaluated what we were doing to help us understand why it was reducing at-risk behaviour as fast as it was doing it for our clients. And so everything we do now, it's like, well, you could tell them what not to do, but your mind can't work on the reverse of a negative thought. So why don't we show them what good looks like? Because if we show them what good looks like, we know they'll copy that. Right. And it's fascinating, but well-intentioned people sabotage themselves all the time because we don't recognize how we are drawn to the negative. As a human race, we are drawn to, it's that fight or flight, right? And once we help people understand our human behavior that comes from nature and nurture, again, it's that heart piece, right? Once we help people understand and unpack, where did your beliefs come from? Where do your attitudes towards females in construction come from? It's possibly a wrong masculinity framework you've got given. Let's help you unpack that. Let's ask some questions that it might be a little bit brave for you to deal with, but you know what? You have to start asking, why did I respond like that? Why did I feel like that? And if we can help guys especially get to that level of self-reflection, we can change things without it being too complicated. So,
that's really cool. So I'm really curious about what you're excited about in the future. What's coming up next for you? And I really want to know what you think the builder of the future looks like. It maybe someone in, maybe not your role now, but what it used to be, this pipe layer, but what does the constructor or the builder of the future look like? So, help us out there?
Yeah, still going to be rough around the edges. But I think, and again, it's bad to say, right? Because if somebody had told me 20 years ago I'd be sat in this room doing this podcast, I'd have told them they were talking a load of rubbish, So I think it would be wrong to be able to project too far ahead, because the change is constant. But what I think people need to be, change is accelerating. Right? So I think what I think it could look like in 10 years' time could be very, very different. But I think if we boil it down to the human element, and I can only speak from my lived experience, where I've spent most of my time in a supervisor or superintendent seat, what we need, because of what this next generation coming into our industry needs, is we need team leaders that are way more self-aware, and we've helped them understand the importance of emotional intelligence, not technical intelligence. It's the human element, because rightly or wrongly, and I've done talks on this, and I've had meetings with, and it's looking at that digital transformation piece. If you look at statistics, over 80% of people who have been exposed to a digital transformation initiative, it's been a negative exercise, because people haven't understood the change process that you have to take people through when you take them on a digital transformation journey. Right. So, and when you think about that, it means that most people that we come in contact with, when we're looking to bring digital solutions into their business or into their organization, they'll have had a negative experience of that before. So they'll be probably a little bit resistant to it. Right. And it's the power of words, right? We use a term, digital renovation, because digital transformation, it scares the living daylights out of people. And so if we're talking building, right, so digital transformation is like, right, we're knocking it all down, we're starting again, right? Big upheaval, right? Digital renovation, it's like, no, so this is the terminology we use. No, we're going to come in and we're going to look at operational improvement. We're going to look at what have you got that you like, that we're going to keep and we're going to integrate with, and what have we got that isn't necessarily fit for purpose that we're going to look at replacing. Straight away, the psychological impact that the different words use is like, when was the last time you had your place renovated? You didn't knock your house down. When you renovated it, you kept what you liked and you just added to it. So it was more of a positive experience, right? And it was less costly and less disruptive to your family. But again, it's giving people those word pictures to say, hey, we're going to come in and renovate your environment. What do you reckon, right? And again, it's just the power of words. Like people are, Broadie, our people don't like change. And I said, well, can I challenge your thinking on that? From our experience, people don't like badly communicated change.
Spot on there. Like the people say, we don't like change, but that's not true. People get married. People make changes to their renovations, like you're saying. Yeah. Change is sometimes
it's constant.
We want it, and
well, and not only that, Michael, we embrace it when we see the value in the change. Right? I look at what we do, and that's where it's quite fascinating that we get brought in often because of situations. And it's like, oh, our guys, they won't use their own phones for work and blah blah blah. And I'm like, all right. All right, well, let's help create a visual SOP. And who's the subject matter expert in your business that knows how to do that task really well? Oh, well, that'd be all Bob. Great. Right. Let's go and talk to Bob. We go and talk to Bob. We engage with him. Say, like, lose the paperwork. How do you do that job? All right, let's capture that noise. All of a sudden, you've got engagement. Right. And then, oh, by the way, only way you're going to be able to access seeing Bob how to do that job is through your phone. Great. Show me how to download it. Right.
Yeah.
Completely different, right? Because it's help. And again, I come up with a little really simple change matrix. And it's like, well, if you have all these 5 elements, you get a successful change. If you have one of these missing elements, these are the feelings that you create within a team. And depending on what's missing, determines the feeling, anxiety, all these different things, right? So it's saying, no, your people don't mind change as long as it's well communicated. So, and that's how we sort of help people navigate that. But slight word change from digital transformation to digital renovation, and it's amazing. Just using different terminology doesn't create the heckles on the back of the neck coming up on people who have had a bad experience from it in the past.
Oh, I love it. That's really cool. So, David, we have this quick fire round towards the end of the podcast. We're going to throw some questions at you. You've got a choice. You've walked into the tool shed, and before you have a hammer, a screwdriver, or a roll of duct tape, or 100. I like to call it 100-mile-an-hour tape.
Yeah,
sounds like it's going to do a lot more than just duct tape. What do you grab?
All depends what I'm trying to fix.
One tool to fix them all.
I think I'd go towards duct tape. I've had good experiences with duct tape.
I thought he would say that. Coming from, he's worked with too many pipes.
That's right.
Okay. Now we've got a material selection. I think I know what he's going to pick here too. So before you've got concrete, steel, or timber. What are we going for?
Well, based on the fact that I've done a lot of concreting work in my career, I'm going to go with concrete.
Yeah. Now, in the world of digital, we've got a lot of tools that we can use. Apple, Microsoft, or Google?
Whatever I'm given to use.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think his care factor is pretty low on this question. Yeah.
But you might care about this one. V8 or EV?
Oh, got to be V8. I don't believe
it, right?
I don't. It's not only that I don't believe in EV. I feel that hydrogen's going to be the better option moving forward. I think people have been sold. I think Elon's done a really great job marketing electric vehicles to a point where it's like, hang on, have we really thought about how much shit we're digging out of the ground and what we're going to do with all these batteries after they've been past the use-by date? I think, I might be completely wrong. Like I say, things can change quick in 5-10 years, right? But for me, give us a V8. There's a Ford and Holden piece in there. I'm not fussed on either, but if I had to go with one of them, I think I'd lean towards the Holden, General Motors.
The better way to ask the question is like F-150 or Silverado. Probably that's, or Dodge Ram.
I think I'd go with the Dodge.
Yeah?
Yeah. I think I'd go with that. I think that digital and traditional, I think I'm both and. And again...
what do you hang... Yeah, that one's a bit like, what do you hang on to that's from the past that you're never going to kind of switch to the digital way, like a digital tape measure, but you're going to keep using the old tape measure, or
I think Yeah, I think for me, going into meetings, like even now, like it's quite ironic. I've got. So you sent me the questions.
What is that? I haven't seen that before. What's that paper? I've never seen that for a long time.
I know, it's amazing, right? But my missus cracks up, right? And I have to do a lot of, like, I read a lot of research papers and all sorts of stuff nowadays. And I still have to print it out and highlight.
Right. The good thing about that piece of paper is it hasn't crashed twice during this podcast.
No. I tell you, mate, when all this turns to custard, it'll be horse and cart. We're going to go full circle. I'm telling you. No, but I think, and if you look at research, again, I always like to try and find the science to verify what we actually put in front of our clients or talk about if we get the opportunities. Like, well, and even if you look at bloody Richard Branson, right, we know that our brain engages more when we're actually writing notes on a piece of paper than if we're typing it into a computer or into an iPad, So, and I get laughed at all the time when I go into meetings. So I've got, I might have a couple of people from our team, and I'll go into the clients, and they're all bringing iPads out and computers, and I'm sat there with I'm sat there with an A5 notepad and a fountain pen, and they're like, "Broadie, don't you run a software company?" And I'm like, yeah, I know, but I'm a bit of an anomaly. So, I think for me, and it comes right back to that whole HI AI. It's got to be a hybrid. We can't get lulled into a false sense of security that technology is going to be the silver bullet.
Very true.
It's going to be great, and obviously AI is the way to go. And lots of other technology, right? That we can't not work with it, but we've just got to be making sure that we don't become too reliant on it, that we lose the value of the human.
Yeah, mate, that has been awesome hearing all of your wisdom. I feel blessed because there's so many little kind of nuggets in there that we'll be able to reflect on, even personally, and for our audience. We just really want to thank you for your time and for being so honest and sharing all that really good life advice, as well as construction industry tips and experience. So thank you so much for sharing.
No, you're welcome, mate. It's been a pleasure. It's been a great way to get to know. Well, I haven't got to know much about you two, but you've certainly got to know more about me. So I really feel honoured that you felt I had something to share that could be worthy of somebody having a listen.